A long time ago, there were Sonic games that used a two-dimensional perspective and an art direction based on Sonic Adventure's concept art. This artistic direction told fans that new things were to come, meaning gameplay elements that weren't present in previous Sonic side-scrollers. And sure enough, this view was correct. Sonic Advance made changes to the gameplay established years prior by adding a button that allowed the player to attack a badnik with an ability unique to the character. This had not been seen before in a Sonic game, other than Sonic Adventure and its sequel, which released only months before the first Advance game. The every button is jump trend disappeared with the older era, and a new trend of characters with many abilities came into effect. Sonic Advance 2 would build on this in a linear, more straightforward fashion, by adding more abilities for each character, as well as giving each a set of area tricks to perform when being launched by a spring or something equivalent. Advance 3 would take an obtuse approach to widening the pool of actions a character can take. Unlike its predecessor, Advance 3 used the tag team mechanic to split abilities among pairs. This way, characters would only have certain actions they can use when paired with specific partners. For instance, Tails can perform powerful moves when teamed with Knuckles, but loses the ability to fly in favor of a gliding punch. While the overall amount of abilities is larger, the player is required to select a team based on the set of moves or abilities they want to use for a level. This approach grants plenty of freedom to the player, but can also give those who aren't familiar with the system the idea that they must choose a specific pair for each level in order to enjoy the game, which isn't the case at all. In the Sonic Rush duology, we saw the handheld titles adopt the campaign system we saw in the Sonic Adventure titles. Since the playable characters had been reduced to the two on the box art, characters' usable skills were no longer split between teams. And while Sonic himself didn't have quite as many abilities as he did in Advance 2, the boost alone was enough to keep many occupied. Some might even say, the other skills were hardly used. The 2D Sonic game is a rather interesting category. Despite having been around for 30 years, I find it to be fairly unexplored. Surely, this must sound strange to many watching this video. For most of its lifetime, the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has confined its gameplay into three segments: single player, time attack, and multiplayer. While the choices are slim, most would agree that this is all a platforming game like Sonic the Hedgehog needs. This is something I'm reluctant to agree with. Rather than confining the game to essentially two modes, I think Sonic the Hedgehog could take a note from fighting games. Perhaps I should elaborate. What I believe is that Sonic the Hedgehog games would benefit greatly from having multiple single-player modes to choose from. A great example of this is, well, a huge amount of fighting games, honestly. But for this example, I'd like to use the 2000 Namco fighting game, Tekken Tag Tournament. When it comes to home console releases, Namco fighting games have a bit of a reputation for expanding on their arcade counterparts. Tekken Tag Tournament for the PlayStation 2 is no exception. This iteration of Tekken deviated from the main series by using a different format where players use two characters to face another pair. If one of the player's characters loses all their health, they lose the match. Even if the other character on the team has health left, the team loses if even one of them goes down. But the beauty of this game isn't just that it used this tag format so well. Not in the context of our topic anyway. What makes this game and its modes so special is that it gives you the option to opt out of the format entirely. You can play without the tag mechanic and simply have matches one-on-one as you would in any other Tekken title. While you can attribute the game's success to being a launch title, or the fact that it improved graphically from the arcade version, the one aspect of Tekken Tag Tournament that makes the game work so well is the variety of ways to play the game, without changing the game at its core. This is something I think Sonic the Hedgehog can learn from the fighting game genre. Now, it's probably been said 1,000 times at this point, but in this context, I'm not speaking from a point of view that is making an argument for more playable characters. So, Let's break down each of the modes to get an understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, starting with campaign mode. Just as the label says, it's the campaign, the real story. This mode is where the player experiences the main plot and uses whatever character the game forces them to play as. While some may find this odd, this formula was taken straight from Sonic Adventure 2, as well as many other popular non-Sonic games. Progressing through this mode lets the player experience the deeper plot, the canon story. Essentially, the true story mode. If you're wondering why the names of campaign mode and story mode aren't switched, we'll get into that now. It was a tough decision to name this story mode when the campaign mode already existed. The names of these modes were actually switched in my pre-draft, but when I wrote the script I got the names mixed up. Perhaps a little too true that the names are confusing. Maybe story mode could have been named single player as well, or even arcade mode. But since this isn't an arcade game, and single player applies to all the single player modes, I elected to use story mode for the video. Story mode gives the player the ability to experience a theoretical story from the point of view of a character the player chooses. As you can expect, you only play as the character you choose. Being an individual character's story gives the developers freedom to depart from the campaign's continuity and give each character an entirely fresh experience. And since this mode doesn't hold nearly as much weight as the campaign mode, each character can have their own unrelated story that has nothing to do with the main plot in the slightest. Locations that never appeared in the campaign can appear in a character's story. Acts and even an act's pathways can vary from the campaign mode's version. While some characters' stories might use the paths of a campaign's acts, other stories may use an entirely different act, or even different zones. While cutscenes may be kept to a minimum, for the sake of fun, I'm going to suggest that each character's story contain a minimum of 7 scenes. Unlike in the campaign mode, there is no pressure to include fully animated cutscenes. 2 layouts for a general story come to mind: a cutscene for each zone, and an additional scene for the ending. And the other layout is a cutscene for the intro to introduce a character's goal, 3 scenes for each zone, 1 for entering the zone, another for the midpoint, or plot device, and the 3rd scene would be for the boss cutscene. And then a scene for the ending, you know, to go with the intro. Initially, I thought having an intro and ending with 5 scenes riddled in between worked marvelously, but I underestimated the potential for this when I made my first write-up. This is something that takes little effort, yet allows a character to be expanded on without affecting their role in the canon story. Remember how we brought up fighting games earlier? In most fighting games, the chosen character progresses through their own story, which is usually non-canon, but helps expand on their character. While Sonic Adventure sees each character go through a canon story, this doesn't actually have to be the case, especially considering the limitations that sets on characters who are heavily involved in the main story. This new format, taken from fighting games, allows characters like Tails, Knuckles, and more to experience a story completely separate from the events that take place in the campaign. Potential events take place here instead, piquing the brains of those fans that wish they could see more of their favorite characters in action. This is the chance to feature such an experience. A hot take for those that enjoy hot takes: character-specific challenges and special stages would thrive here. Some may complain if there are hard challenges here or there, but this honestly serves the game better than having the same challenges over and over, regardless of the character. I feel that you can build fun and refreshing special stages around a character's gameplay. That's just my game design take though. Finally, we can address pair mode. Without a doubt, I am certain this will be the most controversial inclusion, even more so than the multiplayer modes. As stated earlier, I wanted to make sure the gap between the fans of Sonic Advance 2 and Advance 3 wasn't a problem here. As you can already tell, pair mode takes the tag system from Sonic Advance 3 and reintroduces it as a playable mode. Just like in that game, abilities will change based on the combination of characters the player chooses. Initially, I thought it would be better if acts in pair mode only had one version, a pair version to cater to the altered gameplay. But then I remembered that the spirit behind this mechanic was to allow players to choose how they would want to play the game. So I then considered an automated system that would select a version of an act based on the typing of the team. But then I felt that the typing system was more of a detriment and scrapped that idea as well. After some thought, I realized that the typing system can be changed to a system that simply applies a label instead of applying a character-altering attribute. The label can be shown as a color code after selecting characters and never be shown for the rest of the game. I readopted this idea after the conclusion that breakable walls should function like they did in Sonic 3, rather than the way they functioned in Sonic Advance 3. In the pre-draft for this script, I stated that mode-specific stages would not be received well, especially if an amazing stage were confined to pair mode and unavailable everywhere else. But my mind has changed after remembering the basis of the different rather than stripped down approach to content distribution in the game. To continue on the topic of pair mode, this mode can offer pair-specific endings, giving the player a different reason to use different teams every time they play. A nice incentive for curiosity, and an excuse for fan service, like Shadow challenging Sonic to a rematch, or Silver confronting Tails to help him fix a multiverse crisis. This is an excellent way to make use of recyclables or scrapped content. Speaking of recyclables, this would be a prime opportunity to introduce pair-specific tag actions. We saw a glimpse of something like this in Sonic 4 Episode 2 with the double spin dash. In our theoretical game, pairs have tag actions that can only be done with specific characters. Keep in mind, this doesn't mean that the tag action will change for every partner character. There could very well be a character that has less tag actions they can offer as a partner. For example, Sonic's tag action may be his dash panel boost from Advance 3, regardless of who the player character is. Meanwhile, depending on the player character, Knuckles could throw the player forward, or the player could throw Knuckles, like in Advance 3. Knuckles with Tails as the partner could use his fist while being carried. And Amy could do the same with her hammer at the cost of lower flight speed. This could go much deeper, but for now I'm only speaking on actions that would benefit the player's progression through the level. Please feel free to share tag action ideas you came up with in the comments. That more or less wraps up this sales pitch. What brought about this idea in the first place was, how can I include elements from the previous Advance game without isolating the people that didn't enjoy the direction it took? The answer was in front of me as I was playing Tekken Tag Tournament on the PlayStation 2 in celebration that my favorite, or second favorite, character's dad got into Smash. Now, obviously good level design always takes precedence in these scenarios, but that's not something that can always be relied on. A format, a structure to offer players more ways to play can be. While Tekken Tag Tournament hadn't received a sequel till 11 years later, the main series still built on what it did well, and even added a campaign mode so players could experience the true story fans were so invested in, while still being able to experience other characters' individual and theoretical stories. The expansion their stories gives them makes it so easy to love Tekken characters, and I believe the same can work for Sonic characters. This isn't just a matter of a different gameplay style for everyone, but also a chance for characters to interact, grow, and matter in a game where, even if their story isn't canon, it's still an entertaining and important memory for someone that grows up with the game. That's what I'm asking for in this game, this theoretical Sonic game.